Good lord, I'd forgotten how fabulous it feels to wear this outfit. Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons. Today's the 28th day of April, it's the 28th day of VEDA, and unless I've somehow magically miscalculated, because there's no non-magical way of miscalculating, it's Thursday, and so time for another top 5. Now, I did have to have a very long and difficult think about what this week's top 5 should be. Should I go big? Should I do something really fabulous and earth-shattering as far as my opinion goes? But then again, I have to consider, well, what top 5s have I already done? I know last year I did top 5 languages I want to learn, top places that I've been, and then obviously this year I've covered something Eurovision-y, I've covered something personal that no one gives a shit about, and I've covered something that's actually more directly related to this channel. So I thought, well, what can I do that hasn't already been covered in some capacity by the other top 5s? And then I thought, well, there is one subject that's relevant to this channel that I've not covered yet, and that wouldn't seem repetitive if I were to cover it here and now, and I think, given how long it's been since the last installment in that particular series, it's particularly fitting that I cover it now, because, well, it's something that I haven't addressed in quite a long time. Now, if you've been with my channel for just the right amount of time, then you'll know exactly what this outfit means, apart from the fact that I was willing to part with about £300 in Camden Market. When I wear this outfit, it means I'm going classy and talking about books, and so this is my top 5 books, but with a huge asterisk. Now, that's the funny thing with asterisks, they always refer to something, and I hate it when I see an asterisk on something and it doesn't have, like, a thing that it relates to, because sometimes you'll see little claims that have asterisks next to them, and nowhere in the work in question, or the label of the product in question, or wherever you see it, does it actually have a point that asterisk refers to, and it's frustrating. But this one does have a point, and the point is this. There are 5 rules that I've established for this list, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So it is my top 5 books, but it's my top 5 books that, 1, I have read all the way through, 2, that I have not yet covered in TessHex Versus Literature, so as of the time of recording this video, I may go on to cover them later, but for the moment that I have not covered as of the 28th of April 2016, that are fiction only, that are not by an author that I haven't already mentioned in this list, so 1 book per author is essentially that rule, and sorry Tristan, no books by Tristan Black Wolf, because he is an incredible author, but I need to give other authors some space as well, because give me half a chance and I will happily gush about his work. He is a brilliant author, and while I'm here, while I have this platform, I do highly recommend checking out his Patreon. I'll put a link to that in the description below, alongside a link to the TessHex Versus Literature playlist, and also Amazon links to get all the books that I mention on this list, so do check him out, he's brilliant. I did have to give a lot of thought to entry number 5 on this list, because I'd narrowed it down to 2 potential books, both by the same author, both of which occupy spot number 5 on this list. Either way, it was going to be a book by Agatha Christie, because, I mean, she's a legendary author and definitely worth your time to check out. I had narrowed my options down to either The ABC Murders, or They Do It With Mirrors, and ultimately I went with They Do It With Mirrors in the end as number 5 on this list, mostly because I remember it a bit more clearly. That is one kind of sub-item on the list of rules for this list. I have to remember what happens in the story, because it's been a while since I've read a lot of these books, but They Do It With Mirrors is one of the Miss Marple stories, and of Agatha Christie's franchises? I don't think that's quite the right word here, but of the series that Agatha Christie wrote, most of them featured either Miss Marple or Poirot, and I was always a Poirot reader. But that doesn't mean that I disliked Miss Marple, and there's not really a divide there. You can't say, I like one, therefore I hate the other. So this was my first experience with Miss Marple, if memory serves. I think the ABC Murders was a Poirot book. Yes, it is. So I didn't have any experience actually with Miss Marple prior to this book, but, well, I don't remember it too clearly, but I mean, it must have left a good impression, because I can say past me is urging me to recommend this book because it's good, and as is the case with a lot of Agatha Christie's work, it's clever. Like, there's some legitimately clever stuff in there. There's not too much I can say that won't wander into spoiler territory, so I'm going to hold my tongue about that, but I do love books but are this kind of clever, specifically. They have this kind of twist, this kind of resolution. It's clever, I love it, but there's not much I can say that won't give it away, so just do check it out. I would recommend other works by Agatha Christie, but this is the one I'm talking about here and now, so yeah, what could I say? Well, actually, there's a lot more I could say, but I have to get through 4 more books, so let's not dwell on this one for too long. 4th place on this list belongs to the first book in a trilogy by a very niche, very indie, not very well-known American author by the name of Suzanne Collins. Yes, I'm talking about The Hunger Games, there we go. Now, I will say, I have only seen the first of the 3 Hunger Games films, and even then, that was in Sweden, so it was in English but with Swedish subtitles. But I read the books first, and that was the only reason why I went to see the film in the first place. And while I do agree with the critics that, as a trilogy, it does get kind of whiny, and I don't remember the exact criticisms, but I remember reading some critical reviews and agreeing with them, and I won't deny, as a series, it has its faults. Hence why I picked the first book in the trilogy to say, yes, this is one of my favourite books, because as the first book in the trilogy, it doesn't feel too tired compared to the others? I don't know. Because it's earlier in the series, it doesn't feel like it's repeating stuff, or something like that. The point is, it captured my imagination. It was entertaining to read, and it has some really good world building in there. So if they could pick any young adult fiction to turn into a really successful film franchise, I think they chose well with this one. As I said, yeah, it has its faults, but, I mean, most books do. Overall, for what it was trying to be, which was, well, a dystopian future young adult fiction novel, you could do a lot worse, is what I'm trying to say. So, again, would recommend. And if I wouldn't recommend it, why the hell would it be on this list? In 3rd place on this list, and delving back into the obscure stuff, is a book by a Welsh author by the name of Sarah Waters, who is usually known for writing LGBT fiction. Like, that's not to say, oh, she's responsible for the gay version of 50 Shades of Grey. I should have just said 50 Shades of Gay, shouldn't I? She's not responsible for smut. She's just usually well known for LGBT fiction, and I applaud that. But the book I'm talking about here, well, I'm not sure if it counts as a period piece, per se, because it's set in the 1940s. Is that particularly period-y? I mean, it's quite a few years ago. It's entitled The Little Stranger, and admittedly, it's been a few years since I've read it, but it stuck with me. It's a very good book. It's one of those could be supernatural, could be all in your head kind of psychological, not thriller necessarily, but it's got a lot of mystery to it. It's one of those mystery ones, and the resolution at the end, obviously I don't want to spoil anything about it, but the way it's resolved still lets you believe what you want. By the end, you're still not sure, was it all psychological, was there a supernatural element? But that doesn't mean that the ending doesn't still feel satisfying. My most enduring memory with this particular book is that I was introduced to it while I was in high school by way of some sort of strange book competition thing where there were 4 books, and this was one of them. And people were invited to read all 4 and then rank them in order of preference. And of the 4, this one was my favourite, but I think it finished 2nd overall. I don't remember the name of the author of the book that won, but the book that won was my 2nd place. In any case, I would say, oh, it's a really good book, would recommend, but I mean, I'm only on item 3 of this list and I'm already sounding like a broken record, so just trust me, it gets my seal of approval. Arbitrary score out of 10, would read again, do recommend, etc, etc. This shouldn't come as a surprise because it's on my list of top 5 books. In 2nd place on this list, a book that actually sat at my favourite book of all time for quite a few years, and only today did I realise that it was actually written in 1997, in German. So that was kind of a double whammy. I thought it was just this random English language book that was released in like 2004 or something, but no. It's Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funke. I thought it was Cornelia Funk, but she's German, it's pronounced Funke. Again, I don't remember much about this book, but I will say, more so than any of the ones preceding it on this list, it really gripped me by the imagination and shook me silly. It's a high fantasy, well, I mean, you guessed it's high fantasy because the title's bloody Dragon Rider. It's a high fantasy story about a dragon, a brownie, and a human, and maybe others, I don't remember, on a quest to find a place called the Rim of Heaven, which is supposedly somewhere in the Himalayas, which, when I first read this book, I didn't realize was an actual place. Now, I'm not quite sure whether I should heap praise on the original author for this one, or just the person who translated it, or maybe they were one and the same. Maybe Cornelia rewrote the book in English after it being successful in German. I don't know. The point is, it was originally German, and I read the English version, and it was really good. I can't think of much to say about it, because, as I said, I haven't read it in years, but the impression I got from it has really stuck with me, so clearly it must be doing a lot right. I remember it being just generally a captivating story. Yes, it had some cheesy elements to it, shall we say. I believe at one point there's this supernatural creature or race of creatures or something like that who harass the protagonists, and the only way to get rid of them is to talk at them in sentences where every word begins with the same letter, and then just do that throughout the entire alphabet, and that pisses them off, and so they leave. Something like that. So it is cheesy in places, but it's still a really good high fantasy book, and obviously it's accessible for people of pretty much any age, so if you're watching this video on behalf of a child, then yes, this is a child-friendly book, but I suppose it's child-friendly, but not patronizingly so. So it's accessible for children, but it's accessible for adults without feeling like something's missing, or without feeling like it's holding your hand too much. It's suitable for all ages equally, is what I'm trying to say. Accessible for the young ones, but not patronizing for the older ones. Also, did I mention it was my favourite book for quite a few years before I discovered item number 1 on this list, and before I discovered Tristan Black Wolf. So it must be pretty bloody good. And finally, item number 1 on the list is a book by the legendary author Douglas Adams. Now, you might think you can second guess what book I'm about to title drop, but I mean, there's a 1 in 3 chance you're right, but it's not Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. I love this sort of shit. First of all, it's Douglas Adams. It's got that Adamsian sense of humour, if that's even a word. I would use the example of he watched TV at me as an example of that kind of humour, or it flew through the air in exactly the same way that a brick doesn't, but both of those are from other books, but it's that style of humour mixed with intrigue and mystery and detective and clever and eccentric and just inspiring, mind-grabbing, generally just really good. There's a reason why Douglas Adams is revered as one of the greatest English authors of the modern era. And there's also a reason why this and his other works have had many, many adaptations for TV and radio and that sort of thing. And of course, I'd love to see TV or film versions of all the books on this list, and in fact, a lot of books that I've ever read for that matter. But this one actually did get a radio adaptation of some kind that I've never experienced, and also a TV series that was loosely based on the book, but kind of went its own way, which was actually pretty good. As I recall, it got mixed to positive reception, but I think it was good, but it wasn't true to the book. It just took some elements from the book and then kind of created a spin-off universe, which I still think worked, but that's not really relevant to the book now, is it? Now, once again, as is the case with all the items on this list, it's been a few years since I've read it. But once again, it stuck with me. It replaced Dragon Rider as my favourite book of all time until around this time last year, actually. And yes, intrigue, cleverness, eccentricity. Me as fuck. So I do thoroughly I recommend all of them, but I recommend that the most of the 5 on this list simply because it's my personal favourite. It's not been easy delivering this top 5 because I'm basing this list on reactions and opinions that I developed from reading these books the first time, and it's been several years at least since I've read them since then, so it's not easy for me to talk about them. Between not remembering much about them and wanting to avoid spoilers, this might have been kind of a shitty list, but just take them as recommendations because good books, go and read, go and just put down the computer and step away from the other device that you might be watching this video on. Go and read books, you lovely people, because they are brilliant. So as I said at the top of this video, I'll put links in the video description both to the playlist of my other book reviews, which are slightly more review structured and a bit more relevant to the books that I'm talking about, to Tristan Black Wolf's Patreon, because he needs and deserves all the support he can get, and also to Amazon pages for both the UK and the USA, if I can find those links, so that you can go and buy these books for yourself, because they're brilliant! Otherwise, why would I be talking about them? And if you live somewhere that Amazon UK and US don't deliver to, then I'm sure you can find somewhere that sells them for yourself, perhaps even in your language if you don't speak English natively. I don't know. The internet's a wonderful place where you can get these sorts of things. But for now, I will say that I have been and will continue to be Tessellating Hexagons, and I will see you in whichever video of mine you happen to choose to watch next, you lovely, lovely people. See you then, and thanks for putting up with this questionable quality video, because I'm wearing bright white, and that's making me look even paler because I'm being front lit at 8:25 in the evening. I've rambled enough. Goodbye!